Hi everyone, welcome to this channel. My name is Marina. I am a PhD student in American Studies. And on this channel, I'm sharing my experiences and insights from my academic journey. And so this video has been very long in the making because I've been reflecting a lot on what I wish I'd known before starting my PhD. So if I had the chance to talk to my younger self before starting my PhD, there's just so much advice I would give. And it's definitely a journey that is filled with a lot of lows and highs. And there are things I wish I'd known from the very beginning. And as I reflect on my experience, I think there are also a lot of strategies I implemented without really being aware of them. And now reflecting and looking back, I really realize how important they actually were. So today I'm excited to share my top 10 of the things I wish I knew before starting my PhD. And whether you're in your early stages or just applying for a PhD program or already further advanced, I really hope they're helpful for you. Now, this is really, really important. Learn to sit with uncertainty and the feeling of knowing nothing at all. I still feel like this, and I'm almost at the end of my PhD. It's built into the nature of a PhD that you have to deal with not knowing or not having any final results until the very end. So it's only then that everything falls into place and comes together and makes sense. So instead of fighting this feeling of uncertainty, being ashamed of it, and taking it as a sign of your inadequacy, embrace it. It's part of the experience, and the best PhD students I know have learned how to sit with these feelings. Often those who struggle the most are the ones who are not the ones who are not intelligent enough. After all, we were all accepted into the PhD program, but those who can actually mentally cope with the uncertainty. So start writing as soon as possible. And I say this with a grain of salt because I think the first few months are an exception. I remember everyone telling me to start writing as soon as possible, and I felt so pressured that I began writing even though I didn't really have anything to say. And this came at the expense of precious research time I could have used on reading more about my research field, reading more about the primary text I wanted to use. And as a result, I ended up writing a chapter that won't be included in my dissertation because it doesn't fit the larger structure. And it's not the end of the world. Every bit of writing and every bit of work is really progress, but this could have been avoided if I had allowed myself more time to read. Now, especially when you're starting out, it's normal to feel like you have no idea what you're doing, and that's fine. Take your time, but once you have a rough idea of what you want to do and maybe even an outline, start writing. And the best thing I can recommend is to draft an expose. So an expose is a formal document that outlines the key aspects of your project, key questions, objectives, methodology, and a brief overview of the literature. And many PhD students have to write it anyway. If you don't, I still recommend doing it because it really helps you to define the scope of your work, and you really get an idea of what it is, what you want to do. And just in general, as they say, writing is thinking. It's only when we start writing that our ideas really begin to take shape and evolve, that we can organize our thinking. And it just really helps. Also, it helps to produce drafts of what you're writing. And so remember, your first draft never has to be perfect. And so it's just by practicing that you get really good at writing. So start as soon as possible. So at some point, I want to make an entire video about this because this is also where I made the most mistakes. And I think the importance of learning how to set goals during your PhD cannot be overestimated. This is, of course, also when it comes to goal setting, this also varies from discipline to discipline. But what I'm about to share really applies to every discipline and is something probably also to other fields than academia. And that is, your goals should not be tied to the praise or approval of somebody else, even if it's your supervisor or your colleagues, other colleagues in your field. If they are, you will likely end up feeling miserable, except in a few lucky cases. Now, don't get me wrong, it's really important to receive feedback on your work, to talk to your supervisor, to check in regularly, to work through the feedback. However, a common mistake that a lot of people make is that they carry on the goal-setting mentality from their undergraduates. And there, your goals were often about getting a good grade or getting praise from your professors for a great presentation you delivered. But this really changes during your PhD because there isn't really an end product that you can show until the very end, until, I don't know, after 3 or 4 years. And so you might have encouraging professors or colleagues who look at your work in progress and tell you how great you are and encourage you and how great your research is. But there's also the chance that you won't. And you don't want to risk basing your goals on someone else's approval. What if they're having a busy day? What if they're having a difficult time? What if they have other priorities, so your project isn't top of their mind? At the end of the day, it's your project and you're the only person responsible for it. And so you want to set goals that depend on your actions and not on other people's reactions. So for example, I want to finish chapter 2 of my dissertation by September, or I want to complete my first draft of my expose until, I don't know, end of next year, or I want to attend 2 conferences this semester, or you can even be a bit more specific. I want to improve my skills, my ability to present my work in front of others. And that way, even if no one comes up to you and congratulates you on your success, you can still be proud and feel a sense of accomplishment. And this is crucial in a PhD where external validation is rare. And so, again, I'm not saying feedback is not important. It's crucial. But getting good feedback should be an outcome of following your goal of, for instance, improving my writing this semester, and not the goal itself. Accountability. So this is a simple one. Find a mechanism to hold yourself accountable. If you're not in a program where you need to regularly submit work and status reports or meet frequently with your supervisor, create a system for yourself. Ask your colleagues to set a date to share work, or ask your supervisors for regular check-ins. If you don't have anyone available, ask a friend. They might not be able to give you specific feedback. They might not be from your research field, or they might not be researchers at all, but they can at least check whether you're producing something. And even if you're motivated right now because you're just beginning, or you're in a high phase right now, there might be times when you're not, or when you feel overwhelmed and paralyzed. And accountability can help to get through these phases. And trust me, you will always get through them. Support network. It's tempting to isolate yourself, to become this super genius who spends all their time on their PhD, but this is not sustainable, believe me. I've been there. As I mentioned earlier, mental health is crucial and you need other people. So ideally other PhD students who are going through the same experiences. I cannot tell you how often my PhD was saved by being able to talk to my fellow PhD students. So find someone you can talk to, find someone who can support you. There are no quick fixes. It's simple but an important point. There are no shortcuts in a PhD. It's long, sometimes a very difficult journey, and while there are ways to make it smoother, you can't rush the process. And sometimes when we're faced with a problem or a challenging situation in our PhD, we might feel the intense urge to solve it immediately, right? And so this impulse often comes from anxiety or a desire to regain control. And while it's natural to want to fix things quickly, it's important to recognize that rushing a solution can sometimes often lead to more complex or more difficult problems down the road. So instead of trying to find a solution immediately to manage your anxiety, take a break. Talk to someone, do something else, do something that relaxes you, go for a run, and just remember, if you want to address a problem properly, especially if it's a complex research problem, it often requires more time and careful consideration, and patience is really the key. So try to find other coping mechanisms. Don't be a perfectionist apart from the moments where you need to be. So you need to know when perfectionism is necessary and when it's not. In most cases, it's really not. So if you're writing the first draft of a chapter, don't get stuck on one sentence for hours or obsess over footnotes for hours. If you're drafting a seminar plan and debating on whether you should include one more article, don't waste time rereading those articles to decide. Your time and energy are precious, and your to-do list is likely to be endless, whereas your resources are limited. So make cuts where you can. Don't be perfectionist in most things, but know when you need to be, like when you're revising the final draft of a paper that will be published. Mental health and physical health are crucial. I cannot stress this enough. So resting in whatever form might feel like you're giving away time that could be used for research, for writing, or something else that is linked to your PhD, but that's false thinking. Whenever you rest, remember that this time actually counts towards your PhD. Intellectual work is really, really exhausting, and so if you have a day where you can write for, let's say, 5 hours with a lot of breaks in between, that's absolute maximum. That's amazing. I know if I can spend 4 or 5 hours just writing something, I'm just a happy person. But I also know that I'm super exhausted afterwards. And also think of what you can actually produce in 5 hours. It's a lot, right? And so instead of forcing yourself to stay at your desk and really suffer and produce low quality work for the rest of your day because your brain no longer functions as it did in the morning, or feeling guilty while you're doing something else, why not just enjoy the rest of your day, do something else that is important to you. Sometimes you also need to do other things like grocery shopping or whatever. And just enjoy doing it, because otherwise you start the next day exhausted, and that's at the very end of the day, that's less productive than just taking time off. And yeah, I think sometimes you just need to remember that you are a human being like any other, and your body has limits. Sure, we can train to work longer and more concentrated to a certain degree, but there are limits. So be smart about it. So this is my favorite one. All of this is temporary. If you're having a rough time, remember that all of this is temporary. The challenges, the stress, the uncertainty, it will all pass. It's only a PhD. When you spend weeks and weeks and maybe months working on your PhD, you might lose perspective on its true importance. And it's important, yes, and it's important for you, but it's not the end of the world if you hit a small obstacle. So if you find yourself catastrophizing over minor setbacks, and then thinking, no, I'm never going to finish this, or this is going to be the worst dissertation ever, that's a sign you lost perspective. Take a step back, breathe, and remind yourself, it's only a PhD. Attend conferences and workshops. So I always felt so connected and energized when I returned from conferences and workshops. So we spend so much time working alone on our desk, reading a lot of things, and sometimes it feels like no one really cares about your project or is interested in what you're doing. But then you attend a conference and you meet so many people who are doing similar things as you are, and you realize that other people are interested in your work. And it's just an amazing feeling. And there's no greater feeling than really meeting other people who are interested in the same thing as you after months of isolated work and just talking to others about it. So be brave, apply for conferences and workshops, and have fun. So those were my top 10. Maybe a bit more, I stopped counting, but I hope you found this helpful. And if you like this channel, please like, subscribe, and share.